Good evening and thank you for watching. My name is Rachel Leingang, the co-founder of the Arizona Agenda, and I'll be the moderator for this evening's debate. The Citizens Clean Elections Commission is a sponsor for this event. As the state's voter education agency, Clean Elections hosts debates so voters have the opportunity to hear directly from the candidates, ask questions on the issues that matter most to them, and vote informed. Candidates that have a contested general election have been invited to participate in the debate. Please note, candidates from both the Senate and House may be participating in the debate tonight. As the moderator, I will ensure candidates have the opportunity to engage directly with their respective opponents. The questions that will be asked this evening are coming directly from voters. Leading up to the debates, Clean Elections conducted outreach to voters across the state asking for questions for the candidates. Additionally, Clean Elections surveyed voters to learn what issues are important to them. This survey data, along with input from the experienced journalists at the Arizona Capitol Times, Arizona Agenda, and Green Valley News and Sahuarita Sun, have been utilized to guide the discussion so it best serves voters. Of course, we want to hear directly from you, the voter. So voters who are watching this debate live, you can submit a question at any time by emailing debates@kc-a.com, texting 480-808-1814, or calling 480-937-1253. Please specify if your question is for a specific candidate or for all candidates. We screen questions for clarity to eliminate duplications, speeches, or personal attacks on candidates. The debate is scheduled for 60 minutes, so we may not get to all audience questions, but we will try our best. Candidates, you will have 1 minute for your opening and closing statements and 1 to 2 minutes for your responses to voter questions. We encourage an open exchange of dialogue between opponents. If you feel the need to respond to another candidate's comments, you may do so. I may limit responses for time management purposes, and we remind the candidates in the audience that this is a respectful, courteous, and professional environment. Our goal tonight is to connect candidates and voters so our electorate may vote informed. Tonight we have Taylor Kirby, a Democratic candidate for Senate in Legislative District 16, and Keith Seaman, a Democratic House candidate for LD16. We'll go in alphabetical order to start with our opening remarks. So we'll go by last name. We'll start with Mr. Kirby, if you want to start with your opening statement.
Wonderful. You had me there for a second on alphabetical order. I wasn't sure who would win there. Thank you, Rachel. It's a pleasure and an honor to be here. My name is Taylor Kirby. I am a father and I'm a teacher. For me, it's all about our kids. I'm in this race to ensure that our kids have access to a fully funded and thriving public school system, one that sets them up for lifetime success and prosperous employment. I want them to grow up in a community where their voice is heard and valued. That means, in part, protecting their right to vote, particularly their right to vote by mail. With this issue, I think not just of my kids, but of my grandmother, who is in constant chronic pain. She served her community with her whole heart as a kindergarten teacher for 24 years, but now she physically cannot make it to the ballot box. Getting sick or just getting old shouldn't exclude you from having your voice heard and valued. Lastly, I want to make sure that my kids, that our kids, grow up in an Arizona that continues to have access to its water. Arizona families are concerned about what this water crisis is going to mean for them, and our legislature to date has not done enough. Our families deserve better. In fact, our families deserve an advocate in the legislature who will stand up for them. As your representative, I will show up, stand up, and fight for our children and the community they deserve. Thank you again, Rachel, for having us. I'm so excited to be here.
Thank you. Mr. Seaman?
Yes, thank you, Rachel, for hosting this. My name is Keith Seaman. I'm running for the LD16 House of Representatives. I'm running basically for 3 reasons. I've been an educator for over 40 years at schools here in Arizona. I've been able to see what's been going on in the legislature, lack of funding, the disrespect for teachers. I'm also interested to change the vote. It's very important that we have the voting system in Arizona correct and legal. we've noticed that the legislature has over 100 bills that they've voted for to get rid of or limit voting, especially vote by mail. I'm very concerned about that. And as a legislature, I will maintain that that is maintained. I'm also interested in health care from both the children and the adults. When I'm out there, I hear people tell me that they can't afford health care because it's too expensive. Their drugs, their prescription drugs are too expensive. We need to change that somehow. So I want to work with the Democratic caucus and the legislature to bring down the cost of health care and drugs. So that's why I'm running. Again, I'm educator over 40 years. I've been there. I've seen what schools should be. And when I get to the legislature, I will concern myself with those issues as well as water and the other issues that affect the voters in District 16. Thank you.
Why don't we start off with this? This district is currently represented by Republicans. It's a slightly Republican-leaning district. As Democrats, how do you make your case to independent voters or crossover voters that you should get their vote? We'll start with you this time, Mr. Seaman.
When I'm out canvassing, and we've done a lot of doors, I ask them, how do you vote? Because that's one of my interests. Do you vote by mail? And a good percentage says, yes, we do, vote by mail. Well, I asked them, are you aware then that early mail, vote by mail is jeopardized? The Republican legislature wants to get rid of vote by mail or limit it. And they're concerned about that. So I'm hoping that will change some minds. We also talk about schools. A lot of the people I talk to have children who are in schools. And we talk about the funding of schools, the lack of funding. And I tell them, I'm on the Cooley School Board, but by luck, and I tell them that some of the things we've had to do because we don't have the funding. I'm also tell them, and we can concern myself with what I feel is the lack of respect that the legislature has for teachers, for public schools, the things they want to do for public schools that they think that the school teachers are doing and teaching, which they don't approve of, which is not happening. And then we talk about the ESAs, the vouchers. I ask, are you aware that the legislature is taking $7,000 or could take $7,000 from every child from the public and the charter schools to put it into any other place we want to go, into homeschool, into religious church schools, into any other private schools. And once the people understand that's what's going on, oh my goodness, and then they're interested now in voting. So that's how I think we're going to get the independent, the persuadable voters to our side.
Mr. Kirby?
Yes, I would say first that the household I grew up in, my father is a Republican, continues to be. My mother is a Democrat. My grandfather, I think, voted for every Republican since the Eisenhower administration. I joke that we can't have Thanksgiving without forming a bipartisan coalition. I don't care what party anyone comes from. I'm in this race to make our community a little bit better. I'm in this race to bring real change and meaningful solutions to actual problems. I think sometimes the partisan labels get used as a means whereby we can obfuscate from actual issues. Here's the reality. Arizona currently ranks 48th in our schools. We're in the middle of a water crisis. As Keith alluded to, we have too many Arizona families that can't afford their prescription drugs. I'm in this race to try to do something about that. I may not be the best Democrat. I may have some stances that don't gel with people to my left. But I'm here to try to bring meaningful change and meaningful solutions to actual problems that people have. And furthermore, I am willing to show up and sit down with any voter and any concerned citizen in this district to hear from them about what they want from their legislator. One thing that is so vitally important to me that as I've been doing my own canvassing, I've been saying at every door I knock, I want to be a voice for this community. I see my job as a legislator to be there in Phoenix advocating for this community. This community is where my priority starts and stops, period.
You both have mentioned water, and I know that's a huge issue for your district and for the state. We've seen again in the past week additional curtailment of water from the Colorado River. I'm wondering, how would you identify or access further water supply? And then what do you think needs to be done in terms of conservation as well? We'll start with, I believe, Mr. Kirby this time.
All right. So the first thing I would say is this, that the agreement we have vis-a-vis the Colorado River is several decades old. It's unfortunate that we are continuing to work with legislation that frankly does not reflect the population growth here in our state and the current contemporary needs of Arizonans. The first thing we have to do is get all users of the Colorado River back together to renegotiate a better deal. One that reflects the current population levels of all states utilizing that resource. The other thing we need to think about is our groundwater and our rainwater collection. We currently have no protections for groundwater. We currently don't have a system whereby we're collecting rainwater. Here's the reality in regards to the water crisis. We are not running out of water. We are mismanaging the water that we have. And our legislature, up until this point, unfortunately, has slept on this issue. They have for too long ignored the reality of this water crisis and enabled it to expand into what we see today. As a legislator, water would be one of my top priorities, and I would ensure that this legislature no longer sleeps on an issue that is so vitally important to everyday Arizonans.
Mr. Seaman?
Water is critical, especially for our district. As you know, where most of our district is in Pinal County, where cotton is king. The millions of bales of cotton, agriculture is king down here, alfalfa. So agriculture takes a lot of water, as it should. But we have people now, farmers, who can't farm their agriculture, their products. Some people have to go next door, down the street, and borrow money to get people to give them their water, their land, to rent their land so they can do their product, their agriculture. There are people who are actually selling their farms because it's too expensive. They can't do water anymore. There was an issue down in Coolidge, where I'm on the school board, where the SRP came in. I know it's not water, but they were going to take a lot of water for their solar plant, and the people there complained about it because it was going to take too much water. So as Mr. Taylor said, we need to conserve water. We need to develop a water area management area. I understand there is such a thing here in Pinal County, what's good, but up in the Mojave County, where I used to live, big corporations can come in there, just file their application, dig their wells, and there's no regulation. The water comes out. Those are the kinds of things that we need to look into as a member of the legislature. Why isn't equal in parts of the state? Here in Pinal County, they're hurting. What can we do? Conserve water. We're 21%. We're told 21% less water out of the Colorado River. So we need to, as Mr. Kirby said, we need to research it. How do we get more water? Are we going to do the salination that Governor Ducey suggested? That's very expensive. So the research isn't done, but we need to get in there and figure out how are we going to save water, conserve water, or get more water for this area in District 16.
You both had mentioned access to voting. That's something that voters are sending in questions about. I want to I want to understand what your views are in terms of access to voting, ability to vote, voting by mail, things like that. And then also a very local issue for you all, the Pinal County election problems that happen. What role, if any, do you as a state lawmaker have in ensuring that, you know, these elections are run in a way that people can actually participate in them? To start off with, we'll go with you, Mr. Seaman.
As I mentioned in my minute introduction, voting has been very important. That's one of the reasons why I got into the race. When people are denied voting, then that takes care of their democracy. I was especially annoyed when there was all these bills about the early voting, the vote by mail. We need to maintain that. There are people all over the state who can't get to a polling place on election day. It rains a lot up in Navajo, Apache County in November. It's muddy. They're debilitated. They can't leave the house. So vote by mail is very important, and that's one of the things that I'm going to work on within the legislature. Is maintain that, make sure that will not be taken away. We need to maintain vote boxes if that's what it takes. People who can just take their ballot and put them in secure vote boxes, or take them to the county recorder. Voting is very important to our democracy, and I'll do whatever I can for District 16 and the rest of the state to make sure they maintain voting. In Pinal County, that was a terrible thing. I understand it's because they didn't anticipate the number of people who would vote, perhaps didn't have enough money. They were defunded a little bit to not have the proper materials. I don't know if there's much that the legislature can do except call and say, hey, why'd you do that, sort of thing. We need to maybe get together with the recorders of all the counties, the supervisors, they've worked something out, thank goodness, in Pinal County, but the legislature should be concerned about that. But they don't think they have any purview really over the county's elections, except make certain laws. And I hope, I know that we won't make any laws that are going to curtail any type of voting in any of the counties.
Mr. Kirby?
Yes. I am a sixth grade teacher, and part of the social studies curriculum for sixth graders is an introduction to democracy. Where it came from. We start with ancient Greece and political theorists from the Enlightenment. And one of the central things that I teach my kids is the definition of a democracy, which is a society in which, a form of government in which each person gets to have a voice. The way in our democracy in which we utilize our voice is voting. In my opening statement, I alluded to my grandmother, a lifelong Republican voter who can't make it to the ballot box anymore. Excuse me, sorry. Hey, sorry, I gotta have a meeting right now, hold on. We're interrupted really quick by a 7-year-old. I love you so much. Okay, go.
Bye, Daddy, I love you.
All right. Sorry, apologies. I alluded in my opening statement to my grandmother, a lifelong Republican voter who cannot make it to the ballot box anymore. I know that my grandmother is not alone in that. As a legislator, I would work to reinstate the permanent early voting list. Voting by mail is used by a majority of voters here in Arizona, by Republican and Democratic voters. As I said before, my father is a Republican, my mother is a Democrat. Both of them have voted by mail for as long as I have memory. My first priority, the first thing that needs to happen is we need to shore up and protect our vote by mail system. Again, it doesn't matter what party you're from. We all deserve to have a voice in our democracy, and vote by mail brings that directly to our doorstep and enables us to express our voice.
Do either of you believe that there was fraud in the 2020 election? And then if not, how do you address the number of voters who don't have trust in the voting process at this time. We'll start with you, Mr. Kirby.
Yeah, I would say first and foremost that we need to have trust in our democracy. Democracy only works insofar as voters can trust the legitimacy of their democracy. Let me also be very clear. The 2020 election did not have fraud. And this may be, I'm going to call it like I see it, and maybe I'm speaking too straight. But our leaders who have suggested there is, they know there wasn't fraud. What we have seen over the last year is an attempt to sow distrust in our system, in an effort, ironically, to rile up voters and get them back to the polls. It is important as an elected official to tell the truth. This is one of the most basic premises of democracy, that we want our leaders to tell the truth. And each leader who has suggested there was widespread voter fraud knows that they are not being truthful. My promise to the voters of this district is that I will work in truth and in facts. I will work in truth and facts regardless of where they lead me. That's my commitment to this district and to this state.
Mr. Seaman?
I agree with my friend Taylor. I don't think there was any fraud in the 2020 elections. President Biden was elected fair and square. And I think that, as Taylor has said, the people who are going around saying that have divided the population, and there's no trust. They don't know who to trust. My campaign is very transparent. I tell them exactly what the truth is, not what they want to hear. But I think the citizen voters need to do what we're doing now. Listen to the candidates, listen to what they're going to say and what we promise. I think when they listen to those who have the big lie, as we call it, I think they'll hopefully say, hey, that's past. Let's get on with where we're going now. What can we do for Arizona in the next couple of years? So I hope we get trust. I know when I'm out there and we talk about that, I mentioned that, hey, you can trust me. I know that's been hard to do with politicians, but let's see what I can do. Get us into the legislature, and you'll find out that we will do what we're supposed to do with trust. As a teacher, I've always trust the kids. Hope they trust me and tell what the honest truth is. So hopefully, with time, we'll bridge that gap.
Rachel, would it be okay if I added one more thing? I just want to speak to Keith's point and say this, that skepticism of our leaders is good. It's quite good. It's a form of holding leaders accountable. And so I don't blame any citizen, any voter who has been skeptical of the election. I don't. I think being skeptical of our leaders is good. What does upset me is leaders who know better speaking in deception rather than truth. That behavior is unacceptable and unbecoming of people who hold elected office.
Let's move into education. We have two teachers here. What would you, as a teacher, what would have supported you the most that a lawmaker could have done? What would keep teachers in the classroom, and how would you as a lawmaker work to enact policies that do those sorts of things? Let's start with Mr. Kirby this time.
Okay, very good. I want to say first that when we talk about education, we need to recognize a couple of things. We need to recognize that education is not just about education. When we have well-funded, good, thriving schools, guess what? Our crime rate goes down. When we have good, rigorous schools, guess what? That's creating economic opportunity down the line. We're creating future entrepreneurs, future workers in STEM and other fields in the sciences. What I'm getting at is this, that our schools need to be taken care of more than they have been, not only because we owe it to our kids, not only because we owe it to families and teachers, but because it makes our whole community better. Even if you don't have a kid going to public schools right now, your life gets better when the school in your neighborhood is in better shape. With that said, as a teacher in Arizona, I can tell you this, that our schools are not okay. Our schools currently rank 48 in the nation. And we have pretty obvious solutions. The first one, it's not a romantic solution, but it needs more funding. We closed out this last legislative session with something in the neighborhood of a $5 billion surplus, billion with a B. To me, it makes obvious sense to allocate additional funds to the schools and get them up at least to median levels of per pupil spending. That's a step one. There's a lot more we need to do. We need to address classroom sizes. We need to make sure that we have the best teachers in the state. But step one is paying the bills. Step one is making sure our expenses in those schools are paid for and taken care of. We have the money to do it. We do. To be clear, I don't love big government spending, but we have to pay our bills. I was speaking with a voter the other day about this, and I said, you know, I'm a father here in my home. It's important for me and my own family budget to be very, very pragmatic about spending. I want to make sure that I'm saving as much as I can as a father of my two girls. But I can't save so much that I'm not paying the electric bill. I can't save so much that I'm not paying the water bill. If I put all that money that I would allocate to those bills in my savings account instead of paying for them, my house isn't going to be in good. We need to be frugal. We need to be smart, but we also need to pay our bills. And investing in our schools is one of the best things we can do for nearly every aspect of our community and our state.
Mr. Seaman?
I'm not going to repeat what Taylor said because I agree 100% with paying money for pay the bills for the schools. So we are, as he said, 48. We need more funding, but I'm concerned also about what I call disrespecting schools, disrespecting teachers. There have been so many bills in the legislature that they want the teachers to do. One, for example, I can't sure if these passed, but they shouldn't have been written, is teachers need to, or they wanted them to write out their whole year's lesson plans at the beginning of the year and then everybody inspect them. Well, the reason for that, I guess, is make sure that they think teachers are going to be teaching something that shouldn't be taught or they don't like. But as a teacher, that's not very good educational policy. When you teach a subject, even though it's on your curriculum, on your lesson plan, something happens in the classroom. A kid makes a comment, so you have what's called a teachable moment. So you put that curriculum, that lesson aside, because what you're doing is very important. It goes along with teaching children. You know, that's what we're trying to do. But then, if the laws pass, and by doing that, they could be fined. So that's one of the reasons why I think teachers are no longer staying in the classroom. That and the funding, they understand. Carrie Lake, for example, wants to put cameras in the classroom to see what every child is talking about, the teachers are talking about. Besides that being against privacy, that could affect predators. They know somebody's in the classroom. And then again, how's the teacher going to teach creatively knowing that the spies up there. Those are the kinds of things that's happened in the legislature too. We had in Cooley, we had several people leave in the first semester. Now I didn't really find what they were doing. What they said could have been very honest, but I dare say it's because of what's going on in the classroom. It's because of the wage. A lot of teachers have to work other jobs. So those are concerns. Also, I'm concerned about the bill, since the Republicans think that the way to take care of the lack of teachers, just hire anybody out of high school and have them teach. Now, that's a crazy idea. First of all, teachers are certified for a reason. They're masters in their subject and also in professional development behavior. A child or kid out of high school may not do that. Teachers have to stressfully deal with discipline problems. An 18-year-old may not be able to do that with no training. So those kinds of things bother me as an educator. And also, we're talking about education, and we'll probably talk about this later, is this idea of the ESA, the vouchers. Again, they're pulling money, $7,000 off any child in Arizona to go to a private religious school. Well, that's taking more money out of the public schools and charter schools, which are already underfunded. So those are, I think, some of the reasons why we can't get teachers. People are hearing about that in other places. There's some of the reasons why teachers are just saying, I give up. I just can't do this anymore. So it all comes back to what Taylor said, is the funding, and then trust teachers. Don't put them in the position where they feel they can't be trusted. They're always being watched. So education is one of the things that I'm concerned about. And as Taylor said, we get into the legislature, we're going to fix all these things, and make education a profession again.
You did, in fact, beat me to the punch on the ESA's question. So let's talk about that. I'm wondering, for both of you, whether you think ESAs should exist at all, and then whether you supported the recent expansion to all K through 12 students. Let's start with you, Mr. Seaman, this time.
Well, I think you kind of got the idea from my previous questions that no, I don't think it should exist at all. I certainly don't think it should be expanded. I was concerned when a couple of years ago, it only went to so many students, but now, this last legislative session, any student in any student in Arizona can do an application, get the $7,000 and go to any school. I have some concerns about that. My three concerns are the accountability. I understand there's no accountability as to where the money could go. It may not go. If the child is already going to a private school, the money may not go because no one checks on that. I'm accountable for the schools themselves. Are they qualified? Are they following the curriculum? I'm also accountable to the state. Public school children are taught a curriculum which is approved by the legislature, the Board of Education. Is that being taught in the schools where we send the money? Are the kids being tested? We not anymore. The teachers have to test their children May and April, certain areas. That's not being done, or might not be done in a school where the child goes on the vouchers. And is $7,000? Most private schools are in the tune of 15, 16, 20,000. Is $7,000 really going to make a difference? It may for those kids who are already going to private schools, but how does it help the student who can't afford that? Who can't even afford the $7,000? The minority students maybe, or that. So does it help that? It seemed to be an elite scholarship. So no, I don't want like vouchers, and it shouldn't be expanded. One of the things that I'm going to work on when again the legislature is limit that if we can't cut it all together.
Mr. Kirby?
Yes. Let me start with this. I think it's important to take vouchers at their premise. The premise of a voucher is that it enables a student who perhaps comes from a lower socioeconomic background to be able to go to a quote unquote better school. My first issue with that statement is the assumption that the public schools are not good enough. As someone who has taught in Arizona public schools, I can tell you that while they need more support, you will not find more dedicated teachers than you will in a public school. But let's for a second take that point, that there are better schools out there that a student can attend. Here is the reality. These vouchers do not cover the full tuition amount. For an average student, there would still be several $1,000s they would need to cough up in order to cover the tuition of this private school. And I want to repeat very clearly something Keith just said. These vouchers do not enable you to attend a charter school. They are exclusively enabling a student to attend a private school, okay? They're taking money both from public and charter schools. So the reality is then this, that a student from a low, let's imagine a lower socioeconomically situated student, now has to come up with that additional several $1,000s in order to get to that private school. I can tell you this, as someone who grew up in a family that was a lower socioeconomic family, we didn't have a couple extra $1,000s to make up the difference. We didn't. So what ends up happening is that the students, these vouchers purport to help students whose families are struggling, end up staying in the public schools that then become less funded thanks to these vouchers. Should they exist? I can tell you this, that public schools have lost $1 billion with a B dollars thanks to this voucher expansion. That my students, and by the way, I teach at a charter school. I respect the premise that that parents should be able to choose the school that their kid goes to. That, I think that's great. But my kids at a charter school now receive less funding because of this voucher program. It is not helping the students it purports to help, and indeed, it is making it harder for them to succeed. That's the bottom line.
We'll do one more question here on education before moving on to other topics. A question from a voter. Do you support critical race theory? And then kind of to add on to that, do you believe this is being taught in K through 12 schools in Arizona? Mr. Kirby?
Yes, very good. Let me say something very, very clearly. Critical race theory is not being taught at any K through 12 school in Arizona, and indeed in the nation. I think, I don't know if you asked this in the question, but it might be worth asking how I would define critical race theory. And the hard reality is, I don't know if I could. Critical race theory is a high-level academic theory debated amongst perhaps 15 to 20 college professors in this country, and has nothing to do with curriculum that is being taught in schools in reality. It has, however, become a boogeyman and a means whereby we can demonize teachers who are just trying to do their job. Now, let me also ask maybe the follow-up question or the implication of this question. What should be taught in classrooms? Real history. Real history. Our kids need to know what occurred, our kids need to know the real history. And that includes teaching the good, the bad, and the ugly. And I got to tell you this, I think our kids can handle that. In addition, our kids need additional supports in the sciences and their reading. Our literacy levels are far below that of other schools in the nation. But the takeaway is this. If we want to get serious about improving the curriculum and improving the strategies, the pedagogical strategies of teachers in the classroom, we need to put more resources there. And up until this point, I haven't seen the legislature willing to make a significant, meaningful investment in our schools.
Mr. Seaman?
I'm glad he went first because that's exactly what I would have said. I believe in all that. No, I think CRT was, as a political ploy, was developed by our opponents to vote against us. They think that, well, the schools are not doing the job. They're propaganding our kids. They're making the kids feel bad and self-pity. But because we teach honesty, we teach what the Civil War was about, the slaves are about. It's who we are as a nation. And I agree also with Taylor. I even checked this out in my own school district. No, CRT is not being taught. You know, as a school board member, I know that Taylor, also a school board member, found that out, that they're doing this. They would be upset because it's not American history. It's watered down. And how are these kids going to exist as they grow up in America, knowing that they didn't get the whole message? So I think it's just a political ploy to make people distrust again, to distrust the public schools.
Let's move on to another topic. We'll move on to abortion. As we've seen in the past 2 months or so, the U.S. Supreme Court has overturned the Roe versus Wade precedent, allowing states to restrict abortions as they see fit. Do you believe in any restrictions or parameters to abortion access? And if so, what are those parameters? Let's start with Mr. Seaman.
I was disappointed, obviously, when the Supreme Court dropped down Roe v. Wade. Abortion, in my view, is a type of it's health care, and the government should not be in the business of telling a woman what she can take care of her body. I'm a man who takes care of my body, you know, when I want to. Why should a woman not have that right? I think it's between the woman, the family, and the doctor as to what whether or not she needs to have abortion for her own health, the health of the baby, whatever. As far as limitations, again, I think that is between the doctor and the family. That they're going to be discussing what the consequences are going to be. What happens if she continues the pregnancy? I would hope that the doctor and woman decide, okay, maybe it is too late to not go to full birth, and then they don't. But that's something that they need to decide on, not the government.
Mr. Kirby? You're muted.
That's embarrassing. I was a teacher during COVID too. I should know better. Apologize. I had my 7-year-old's been quite good. My 3-year-old was having a difficult moment out there that now apparently is public. But I'm going to say something that will sound strange at first, and I just stick with me for a second. I believe truly that this is an issue that unites us much more than it divides us. There are very, very, very few people who believe that abortion should be illegal in all cases. Additionally, there are very, very few people who believe that there should be no restrictions at all on abortion. The vast majority of voters in our district and beyond agree that there are circumstances in which an abortion is permissible. Let me tell you my view. I'm concerned, to be very candid, about what this 15-week abortion ban will mean for women in the state. This ban that is currently in effect makes no exception for rape or incest after 15 weeks. No exception. Forgive me, but I think about my own daughter. And if my daughter was raped, and if for some reason she found it difficult to talk to dad about what happened to her, for 15 weeks. And by the way, most women can't tell they're pregnant until about 6 weeks, right? If she could not find it in herself to come to her father or her mother about this rape before 15 weeks, she would be forced to carry that pregnancy to term. I think most every voter in this district can agree that that's not correct. I do. It's my conviction. It's my conviction that abortion is a difficult and private choice. And I want to ensure that my daughters grow up in an Arizona that if, God forbid, they were assaulted, and God forbid they got pregnant, that they could make that choice for themselves. Like Keith, I believe that abortion is an incredibly complicated issue. The difference, to be candid, between me and my opponent, though, is that I believe because it's so complicated, it is best determined by the individual woman. My opponent believes that it is best determined by the Arizona government.
Let's move to infrastructure. This is a common theme in rural areas, as you both well know. Are there specific infrastructure projects that you'd like to see within Legislative District 16 that you'd be advocating for when you get to, if and when you get to the legislature? We'll start with you, Mr. Kirby.
I apologize. Could you repeat that question? Your audio cut out just a little bit for me.
Sure, sorry. Are there specific infrastructure projects in Legislative District 16 that you would advocate for if you were elected?
Yeah, very good. This is a little ironic, as my internet was a little slow right there. But we need to be better about ensuring that all rural communities have access to broadband. As someone who was a teacher during the pandemic, I can tell you, actually in and out of the pandemic, that the kids who had access to internet at home perform far better than kids who don't. It's time that we recognize that broadband internet access is a commodity, just like water, electricity, heat, and air conditioning, and we need to treat it as such. We need to do more to invest in our broadband in our rural communities, and for nothing else but for the kids that I teach who don't have access to it and deserve better.
Mr. Seaman?
I was going to say the same. I know that Congressman O'Halloran, has been very concerned about that, and I've attended some of the meetings, work places he's had it in the county, and the government's working on that. The congressman understands the importance of broadband. However, I agree with Ted. We need to make sure that that's okay. Because we have people in District 16 who are very remote, who may not be able to get towers down there, but they need broadband. And for our Tucson voters, we need to get Interstate 10 fixed through Tucson. Every time we go there, there's something else going on. So I appreciate that. I think some of the roads especially in rural area in Pinal and Pinal County need work on. And I know a lot of times that might be a city, but the Arizona DOT probably has a plan doing that. We need to make sure what those are. Bridges over the San Pedro River and the Santa Rosa Wash down towards the Teal Nation need to be inspected and make sure they're all working well. So the infrastructure for the roads, bridges, broadband need to be made well. And if there's anything that we can do in the legislature to help these things in District 16, we'll certainly do.
We've seen the state take recent actions in terms of border security, putting up some barriers with shipping containers recently and busing migrants to DC. I'm wondering, do you believe that the state has a role in border security? And if so, what is that role? We'll start with you, Mr. Seaman.
Okay, I wonder, yeah. Yeah, since Arizona does border Mexico, I think we're concerned about that. As we all know, that the role for security and of the border is the federal government's job. They have increased the security as far as the border guards. They're sending some of the migrants back into Mexico, but we need to make sure that we treat them with mercy, with patience. The state could, I know they spent $1 million, I think, or so on security. I don't know though if a wall. We saw what happened with the wall last week. It was torn down. The wall doesn't help. They can get over the wall with a ladder. They can go around the wall to New Mexico, California, if they want to get in Arizona. It may stunt their growth a little bit, but I think the state might help the feds by maybe investing in technology, drones, so they can better inspect who's coming over. And certainly, I know one of the issues that people have from the border is all the drugs coming over. I would think the state is concerned about that, as should the federal government. They need to cooperate in getting all the drugs out. I know that all the drugs are not necessarily brought over by the migrants, but they need to maybe get technology, drones, more guards to get the drugs off the street.
Mr. Kirby?
Yeah, I would echo much of what Keith said. Let me start with the premise of the question. There are a couple of things that are true at the same time. The first is that this is much of this responsibility lies with the federal, not the state government. But let's entertain the question anyway. The second thing is that we in Arizona are a border state. We have a responsibility to protect that border, to keep it secure. There is nothing wrong with saying, and I say it unapologetically, that we need to protect and secure our border. The other thing that is also true at the same time is that we need to ensure that our tactics at the border are compassionate. We need to support those who are coming here the right way, seeking a better life. To be very candid, I think most of us in this state get that. Many of us in this state have grown up knowing someone who is a first or second generation immigrant. It is important that we secure our border. It's important that we protect ourselves against all of those ills that Keith outlined. It is also important that we recognize and refuse to vilify those who are coming here the right way, seeking a better life. It's maybe corny, maybe cliche, but I remain a believer in the American dream. And I think that it is important that we ensure our immigration system can support those immigrants coming here in search of that dream.
A lot of different affordability issues are kind of layering on top of each other here for us in Arizona. High inflation, high gas prices, housing affordability, kind of getting out of reach for people. What, as state lawmakers, could you do to sort of help with those kind of kitchen table checkbook issues? Mr. Kirby?
Yeah, very good. Let me say first and foremost that you're absolutely correct. Things remain too expensive. I've been excited to see prices fall in the grocery store. I filled up my gas tank the other day. I'm pretty sure the price was $3.55. I couldn't believe it. It was wonderful. And listen, I am a single father supporting 2 girls on a teacher's income. I have had the firsthand experience of being in a grocery store, getting everything you think you need, and then putting a few groceries back because you realized you were over budget. And the first thing I would say is that our legislature needs to do more to ensure that we are protecting Arizona families. There's a lot more to say. I'm happy to go into all of that. But I want to add, as I think I've already gone over the 1 minute allotted to me, that in this setting, I am uniquely frustrated that the legislature decided to take that $1 billion away from our public school system. Everything is too expensive. It's harder in this moment for our public schools to function than it was before. And in a moment in which everything is too expensive for Arizona families, our legislature decided to take $1 billion away from kids. From kids. The kids I teach now have less opportunity, less funding in their schools because of a decision the legislature made. In this moment, when everything is too expensive, that action is inexcusable. Again, there's more to say, and I'm happy to do it. But step one, we need to think seriously about how to support Arizona families. And we need to make sure that we're doing everything we can to support our kids in the public schools.
Mr. Seaman?
I think your question asked a couple of things, but inflation, but you mentioned specifically gas prices. I think you alluded to housing as well. As Taylor said, gas prices are coming down. We appreciate that. I think a lot of that was due to the administration in opening some of the wells and stuff. Groceries are coming down too, but I think a lot of that to do with the supply system, during the pandemic. Now the pandemic is more or less leveling off. I think things will start coming in. On the housing issue, we all know, we all read the papers and see the news that the housing crisis in Arizona is getting terrible. Where Arizona used to be an affordable place to live. Some of the things that I've been thinking about we might do for housing as a legislature, maybe convince the cities that they need to change some of the zoning. When a developer comes into a city to build houses, talk to them about, why don't you build a certain percentage of affordable housing? Why don't you build, if you're building apartments, why don't you build some that are affordable for people to do? I know that there's a housing trust fund that the legislature set up. It's got several $1 million in it. Some of the Democrats this year tried to add to that and give that to the housing development department, but it failed. The legislature decided not to do that. But that would have gone to the cities and say, what can we do to help your housing crisis? So we need to look at those sort of things, how to make the people be able to afford houses, be able to afford their rent, not be evicted, put some restrictions on that. But again, as Taylor said, we as legislators will do what we can in our little part of the state in District 16 to solve those issues, from Tucson all the way up to where we go up into the Gila River and down here. Something needs to be done. The legislature hasn't done it, but the two of us, along with the Democratic caucus, are willing to look into housing and solve these. So thank you.
I want to ask one really quick question to both of you. 10 seconds each will be a lightning round. What's the first bill that you would introduce if you win your election? Mr. Seaman, you first.
We've talked a lot about the voting issue. That's one of my hot issues. Education, of course. I think when I get up there, and I think Taylor said it also, to make sure the early voting list is maintained, make sure that the 80% of Arizonans can vote early, and to fix some of the voting issues. So I think that might be one of the things I would work on.
Mr. Kirby?
It's going to sound like a cop-out, but I have the same answer. First thing I would do is protect the early voting list. There's nothing more central to our democracy than the right to vote. The government has no business restricting that.
Mm-hmm.
We'll move now into closing statements. And I believe we started with Mr. Kirby at the opening statement. So we'll start with Mr. Seaman this time. 1 minute, and it's all yours.
All right. Well, thanks, Rachel, for hosting this. You have seen the two of us, Democrats, where I'm sorry to hear the Republicans turned out to come, but you'll hear about what they're doing. Our philosophy is to go ahead. do what needs to be done in Arizona from now on. Not dwell on the past, not dwell what happened in 2020. Let's get over that and work on the issues that we have in LD16, along with the rest of the state. So I hope you're convinced that Keith Seaman is the one you need to vote for in the Legislative District 16 House of Representatives. Thank you.
Mr. Kirby?
Thank you. I want to say this. I end tonight I end this debate a little frustrated, and I'm frustrated that none of our opponents are here. It's frustrating for me because these are still my representatives. I'm frustrated not just as someone who's running for office, but also as a voter, as a citizen in this district. You know, as I alluded to earlier, my father is a lifelong Republican, as is my grandfather. My dad supported John McCain, he supported Ronald Reagan, he supported George W. Bush. These were heroes in my house. My father believed earnestly that we need serious people in office to tackle real serious problems. And I can tell you this, Arizona voters are looking for a change. They aren't interested in candidates who blow them off. They are tired of being blown off. Arizona voters are tired of our schools ranking 48th. They're tired of a water crisis that has continued to grow because they were blown off. And they are tired of a housing crisis that continues to escalate because our legislature refuses to act. One thing that I hear consistently from people as I canvass is that they don't care about party, they care about individuals. I want to speak directly to the members of our district and say this. Taylor Kirby and Keith Seaman showed up tonight.
Exactly.
And Taylor Kirby and Keith Seaman will show up to tackle real problems for this district. Taylor Kirby and Keith Seaman will never stop showing up and fighting to make our community a little bit better. It's often said that the first step of success is showing up, and I can say with confidence that Taylor Kirby and Keith Seaman will always follow that first step. It is a pleasure to be here tonight. I am Taylor Kirby, and I will always show up and fight to be the best voice for this community I can be. Thank you, Rachel.
Thank you both. This concludes our debate. To our candidates, thank you so much for participating. To the voters, we thank all of you who took the time to watch the debate and inform yourselves before the November 8th general election. As a reminder, the voter registration deadline is October 11th, and early voting begins October 12th. All registered voters can participate in the general election. We encourage you to visit azcleanelections.gov for official, accurate voting information. Thank you all. Have a good evening.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rachel. It's a pleasure.
Bye.